All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on our policy committee call today. My name is Jennifer Parker. I am the secretary of the Food Policy Council and the co-chair of this committee, along with Dell, who's here with us today as well.
Hello
And
there.
hi. And we are very lucky to have Ann Nyhuis here, who is going to be talking about a very interesting subject. But before we jump into that, I'm going to just do a little bit of housekeeping. As you know, we are a council and we're voluntary. We run off of all the skills and talents of every member that we have, as well as the budget, obviously. So if there is anybody here who either doesn't know much about our council yet and would like to, and or is a member but would like to be more involved, we would love to have you. We need everybody's input to help forward bettering the food system and making it more a fair place for everyone. And so we would love to have you. I'm going to have Kendra just put up a link right now, and that will send you to our website where you can learn more about us and the work that we're doing, and how you can join us. And please share the love. Definitely tell your friends, family, or your colleagues, other like-minded people. We would love to have them on board as well. We're in a very incredible project right now that's going to be very impactful for our council, but also for Feeding America, who we are working with. So we would love to have you on board for that. Also, please follow us on Facebook. We will post that link as well, and you can find it on the website. And share, like, all the support that we can get helps to build our membership in the community. So please follow us there. And with that, we will start our presentation. However, we're going to mute everybody once it starts talking. If you do have any comments or questions, please save them for the end. We will have an open discussion. But also on our website, we have a live forum that we can now finally go to and continue our conversations, because an hour just sometimes isn't enough, after having a presentation and, our announcements. And I know you guys have lots to contribute and lots to say. So you can now go to the website and continue your discussion there. So Kendra is going to also put up into the chat here the link to that. And with that, I would like to introduce Ann Nyhuis, sorry. She is the owner of the Gardens Brewery, and so I'll have her tell a little bit more of that. And also a former paralegal, is that correct?
Yes, formerly, yes.
Yes. So she definitely knows a lot of the ins and outs of this, especially having her own company of developing goods and bring them to production. So she knows a lot about this cottage industry, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call have tons of questions about this themselves, because there's a lot of barriers. With that, I would like to hand the mic over to Ann.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me and the Florida Food Policy Council, extending me the invitation to talk a little bit today about what Florida is calling cottage food regulations. Typically, cottage food laws are nationally, and they're administered by each individual state's Department of Agriculture. Some states have it, most states do, but some do not. And as the legislative bodies absorb the concept of homemade items, it would fall under this particular regulation, which we're going to discuss today, strictly about Florida. So I'm going to use a slideshow presentation, and I hope you can see it and follow along. So the question I'm typically asked when it comes to dealing with cottage industry is, do you need an FDAX? And that's the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services for the state of Florida. Their acronym is FDAX. And they want to know if you need an FDAX license or training for your local artisan product under the cottage industry. So today we're going to have a discussion about that. The cottage food operations require no licensing or permitting from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services and are not inspected by any state or government entity. And so today we're going to talk about where to get the knowledge about Florida cottage food, what's really up with phrases like end user or not allowed foods, and what that means for you as a starter cottage business. And then what's the mandatory labeling on your cottage product?
Is now joining.
Okay. And how to stay up to date with cottage regulations. I'll ask that you save your questions for the end of the slideshow because I probably will address a lot of your questions, but I expect more detailed questions at the end. Thank you. Okay, so Florida legislation set up guidelines many years ago. When I first looked at cottage law, it was in 2011. And I was interested in the types of cottage food products that were allowed. So these are yeses. They limit your cottage food production and where it can be sold. We'll go into that in a little bit. There are certain registrations, maybe not licensing, and permits required whenever you're associating yourself with food production in the state of Florida. So you have to know what is permitted and not, and we'll address that. And then there's limits on the amount of money you can make on your sales, as well as requirements on your labeling, and there are minimal regulatory requirements and licensing on cottage foods, separate from, let's say, manufactured foods. And of course, much more. We're going to address much more. So let's get started. Okay, so the safety guidelines for cottage food operation, you really need to know the difference. You have permitting foods, and this is all food preparation, processing, and repackaging and storage has to be performed in a permitted establishment, and that requires licensing that is set by regulation and food code regulation, as well as it parallels the United States Department of Agriculture and their regulations for food handling and safety. And then there's the exempt from permitting, which was known as the cottage food operation, and that is what we're going to talk about today. They're non-potentially hazardous foods prepared in a consumer's primary residence. It's sold directly to the consumer from the home, or at a flea market, or at a green market, or a roadside stand. And we'll go into a little bit about that next. Okay, so what is an approved sales location? Well, under the cottage food, you can sell direct to the end consumer. That means the person who is giving you the money and is going to consume the product. No middleman is allowed. And for that sell to direct, you can operate your artisan product in a primary residence, and you can sell from your primary residence so long as the person that you're giving it to is the end consumer. And you can also bring your product to a farmer's market, flea market, and a green market. And so these are the approved sales locations. Now, there are prohibited methods of sales. You cannot sell direct to an end user if you're a wholesaler. And that's like giving it to somebody else to sell it for you for resale. You can't sell it to a restaurant or a grocery store or a mail order or by consignment. So I get asked a lot of questions on that particular topic, and we'll go a little deeper on that on the next slide. But pretty much what's noteworthy is people wanted to know, can I sell my product that I make on the internet? And there does exist an internet sales clause in the cottage food of late that occurred in 2017. Okay. So cottage law allows small-time producers. And in 2011, the small-time producer had a sales limit of $15,000. And as of late, it's up to $50,000. You can't exceed $50,000 in retail sales amounts. So college law allows a single-family residence with at least one stove or oven to produce an allowed food. We'll get into that in a minute. You can use appliances at home to process and manufacture low-risk foods for direct sales to consumer. And remember, that means cash or check or payment. You give them the product. What's not approved under the cottage operation, which is confusing for some people, they ask all the time, can I use a permitted facility? No, you may not. You can't use your garage. You cannot use your shed. You can't use a barn. Can't use an outbuilding, and you can't even use your summer home. And a lot of people didn't know that. They thought, okay, I have a secondary home, I can retrofit that on the property and I can make all I want, but that's not allowed.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Okay, so what you need to know. Selling and delivered directly to a consumer only, the cottage food product must be sold and delivered, as I said before, to a consumer or a private event venue. Let's say you're doing a wedding and you're making cupcakes. You can accept a payment on the internet for that event, but you must deliver directly to that event. You can't put anything in the mail. And wedding and birthday parties fall typically under cottage for that, for our bakers. When they say no wholesale sales, they mean sales of the cottage food products that are prohibited at a lesser amount or consignment. For example, manufacturers can produce in bulk quantity of food and give a reduced price for a reseller. And then that reseller business or person or internet like Amazon can sell it for a higher suggested retail price and make the difference on the wholesale to retail price for their own profit. That's not allowed with cottage. So they're strictly doing business with you. And then within the Florida statutes, the cottage food operations can sell their cottage foods only within the state of Florida. So even if you're doing internet sales, delivery can only occur within state lines. You can't cross state lines where like a manufacturer or wholesaler could. Mail order is absolutely forbidden. You're not allowed to take any cottage food and put it in the post. You can't send it through the mail, can't send it through UPS, and cannot send it through Federal Express. An offer for sale and acceptance of payment for cottage food products on their website is only permissible, but the product has to be hand delivered within the state's boundaries. So yes, you can do internet sales. The law allows it, and it allows orders and payments over the internet. However, the delivery is the main thing you have to remember, especially when you're dealing with events or to people's homes. So remember the locations that you're allowed to do this is at a green market roadside stand, and you can do it from your home. A permitted food establishment, let's say you are an established food permitted area, you can't sell a cottage food. So when you go into the markets, all those food sources that you see are licensed through the Department of Ag and Consumer Services. If not, they can't carry it. So it has to be from an approved source, not an unimproved source. All right, and please know that you cannot sell your product to a restaurant either. Okay, so the main thing that I'm asked most frequently is under cottage food, may you only sell your cottage products which are prepackaged and labeled. Labeling is a big concern for people. How do I label my product that I put all my hard energy and love and passion into making it, and I'm going to hand deliver it to somebody? Well, there are very specific labeling requirements. First of all labels must be in English. A cottage food operation needs to put this language, which is going to highlight in blue in a second, is required on your label. It says it's made in a cottage food operation that is not subject to Florida food safety regulations. So there will be a brochure at the end of these slides that you'll be able to glance at in the upload, and it will show you how a label should look. But definitely this language has to be in 10 font, typically in black, with a clear contrasted color. So don't put like black on brown. They want to be able to see it. So your background should be a lighter color, and it has to be easy to read. So the font has to typically be an Arial or New Times Roman. So when you are conducting your cottage business, there are allowable foods and non-allowable foods, and it's strictly based on ingredients. The state determines licensing based on what you're producing and the ingredient that's in it, because they want to make sure that it is a healthy food consumable product. And certain ingredients can cause bacteria formation, it can get people sick. And so that's why it becomes regulated. And a lot of people don't know when they need to change business directions in their business. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about mine. I did make a business change direction. I became a manufacturer because I wanted to add a non-allowable food item into one of my preserves. And for example, it was my spicy Hawaiian pepper jelly. It won an award at a local fair, and it was featured in a cookbook. So when I decided I wanted to make it for the community to sell, I found out that I had a non-allowable food ingredient. Non-allowable food ingredients will span from tomatoes and cucumbers and bell peppers, and like focaccia style breads with vegetables or cheeses in it, fish jerkies, canned fruits that are low acidic levels, raw sprouts, milk or dairy items, yogurts and things like that can be regulated. So that would require you to get a wholesaler or manufacturer license through the state. So in this case, we did change over. So we went from a cottage business to a manufacturing business. So I still sell my jams and jellies and preserves, but I'm no longer cottage. The allowable food the allowable food products for me that was no would have been salsas, barbecue sauces, ketchups or mustards, canned fruits or vegetables, chutneys, vegetable butters, and jellies that have low acidic values like peppers or tomatoes or onion in it. Flavored oils are no, garlic dips and salsas, hummus, pickled, anything fermented, regulation on kimchi, regulation on sauerkraut, regulation on corn relish, pickles, tomato sauces, margarita mixes, just trying to think of some other, Bloody Mary mixes. You can also have to get regulation on certain types of combination of a carbohydrate that might be considered by the state perishable, and you're mixing it with, let's say, an oil or a vinegar. So you do have to talk with the experts when it comes to knowing what licenses to pull. So who do you call? Well, Melissa Durkin is a consumer service specialist, somebody I talk to all the time, very friendly, very knowledgeable. She's a high-level specialist in the department for the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services Food Safety Division. So when in doubt, you can email her or call her, but their mission is to ensure the safe and wholesale food supply and support of Florida food industries. And what does that mean? Well, since 2014, there's been a major shift dynamics in allowing small businesses to bring local made products into the marketplace instead of just dealing with corporate America or corporate big, large companies that produce your food. People wanted better quality, higher and better tasting, some people will say, of food from their urban or suburban areas, promoting buy local movement. And I can tell you that the numbers are staggeringly increasing in like 30% every year. And especially with the new transition in our own cottage law in 2017, they changed the sales amount from $11,000 then went to 15, and then 25. Now it's $50,000. So you can see somebody at home making something has more accessibility for income for their family, so long as they follow the proper rules and regulations. And that's what we're here to talk about today. I want to open dialogue and questions about that. So what you're going to see next is the actual brochure. It's a cottage food operation, a food safety brochure that is found on the internet. And it has like simple questions that are frequently asked. But when in doubt, please call Melissa. She is the expert, and she will tell you whether or not you would need a license or not need a license. So for today, let's just give a talk about allowable foods. So the statute that falls under the new cottage, you'll see this says 50,000 annually, falls under a U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21. But for Florida statute, it's 500.80 subparagraph 5. So you can read the statute and familiarize yourself with why it's cottage, and cottage products are being offered for sale to the general public. But remember, you must have that language on your label, or else you subject yourself to fine if you get caught. A food operation is a one-person show, typically, or two people can do it, within the family home. And they are sent directly to the end user. End user, it means necessarily, it's only the person with the money who is the consumer, who's going to eat the product when you sell it to them. Residents we went over, but potentially hazard foods we just lightly talked about. The requirement for temperature and control for food safety is the main focus for the state. They don't want pathogens or microorganisms to grow in a toxic form that could possibly make someone very ill or death. And animal food products that are raw or treated with heat in certain environments or in recipes need oversight. Even cutting a melon or a leafy green or tomato falls under regulations so that there's no cross-contaminations of a pathogenic microism. I'm sorry, tongue-tied there. So garlic and oil mixtures, they are not modified in any way, so they're unable to support the growth of this toxic or pathogens that could possibly make somebody sick. So let's talk about the types of foods that you can produce. You can make a loaf of bread and rolls and biscuits and cakes and pastries and cookies, candies and confections, and raw honey, jams, jellies, and preserves. And these are high acidic berries that you're working with. Fruit pies and dried fruits, dry herbs and seasonings and mixtures, homemade pasta, cereal, trail mixes, granola, coated or uncoated nuts, vinegars and flavored vinegars, and popcorns and popcorn balls that could be seasoned with a dry mix. Typically, most people want to make products, unfortunately, that are considered in the not allowed food sources, and we talked about that briefly before. Ice and even water is regulated, so bear that in mind when you're going to the green market, that you could get an inspector to your table who would confiscate you, tell you to take the items off your table, or fine you. So be and know the rules, and the rules change a lot. I check every 6 months the regulations. It's through the Florida Department of Ag site, and you can always say current to see what additions or subtractions have been made to the cottage. They call it redactions, made to the cottage laws. But here's a perfect example, if you can see with the mouse. This at the top is how you want to name your label, and then put the title of your name, and then you have to put your home address, and you also have to list the ingredients in such a way under that title that's set by the food industry, and contains any sort of allergic pathogens, and of course the net weight. So these are just samples of how you can do your labeling. And sales, we discussed that. Now it's up to 50,000. That's a nice way to make some money. So your dreams of making a product that's unique, might be in a home family recipe, definitely go for it. talk to Melissa at FDAX and open your business and start selling it and sharing what you make in your community. Processing location, please remember no outside buildings, no sheds, no barns. They want it to be in a clean kitchen. And I did ask Melissa, and this was very interesting, if they do come to your home and you deny them access, you could be subjected to a fine. So don't think that just because it's out of your home that they won't come. If there's a complaint about your food, they'll come to your door. So that's the one downside that I could find. But there really wasn't any other downsides that I could find about opening a cottage business as a startup. So even pet food, are pets considered cottage food? They say no. The cottage food guideline applies to human food only, so bear that in mind. And it goes on to show you, like, let's say you're making apple butter. Yes, butters are made from fresh fruit, but and are considered cottage food, but butters have a less sugar than a traditional jam or jelly, like it was in my business. And so the combination of the acid, the sugar, and the pectin that you add to it, using it under a time-controlled heat environment, it's cooked, it makes it safe, and that's why it became a cottage item. But can you press and sell apple cider? No. Tinctures, yeah, but you have to contact a sub-part of the Florida Department of Ag. That would be the Department of Business and Professional Regulations in the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco for any alcohol use in a product. They are regulated. There is licensing involved, but you would have to talk to them about your ingredient to find out directly what it is that they're going to regulate and what part of it they're not. The main thing about the Department of Business Regulation is that's the side of the business for restaurants and chefs and caterers or mobile food units, people who take their items made at a commissary location, and that is a commercial kitchen setup or a regulated kitchen, safe kitchen, and then they cook it there or deliver their waste products there. And in all fairness, it's really in combination with the health department. Let's keep all our food safe for everybody. And then they take that product to the green market, and the green market in turn will let them sell their product, but they may still be regulated under the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So those are questions you can ask the folks. And pretty much homegrown fruits and vegetables and baked goods are allowed. So like we have a pineapple patch in our own nursery, and we could, if we wanted to make pineapple upside down cake and sell it, we could do that as a cottage business. So this is what the brochure looks like, and we're definitely going to keep this up on the replay, so you can see there's a website down below in the links for labeling, how to list your allergens, how to follow the Food and Drug Administration food code for your labeling as well, and the Florida statute. So I'm going to leave the question and answer session open. Feel free to ask away. Hello? Did I lose it? Okay, we're here? Okay, cool.
Yep, we're still here. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation and tons of information that's very useful, even for myself. So I really appreciate it.
Great. I'm going to put myself up so you guys can see me. And I open the floor to questions, because I'm sure you all have them.
Yep.
Has anybody got a question? Hi.
Hold on. It sometimes takes people a minute to.
Sure. Well, let's just talk a little bit about what I did. I wanted my pepper jelly, which is very tasty, to be used for dipping sauces, and I had to call the state, and it took me about 3 months to get through the process of finding out, finding a kitchen that was licensed, having an inspector come to the kitchen, watch me make the recipe, and we had to do what was known as a processing authority letter. That meant we took our recipe and sent it to a lab for testing. because they watch the water content in your food product. And that processing letter shows you step by step on how to make that actual product. And if anybody was to make it with you, would they just follow the steps, it would be considered safe, and that you wouldn't have to write what's known as a HACCP plan. Now, I know this seems like a lot of information, but when you make a food that is regulated, they want to know what controls you've taken, steps you've taken to control the heat, its exposure to the air, how you're making it shelf stable so it can sit on the shelf and not have refrigeration. And so all those things are written out. And the processing authority letter is done by the lab for you, so it kind of, you don't have to be an expert in that area, you just follow your recipe. And if there's something wrong with the recipe, then the lab will tell you, and you tweak your recipe till it's shelf stable for the consumer. So that is something you can do when you're working with low acidic foods. Even if it was grandma's famous recipe, they do still want you to go through a vetting process for your ingredients. But let's say you're a caterer and you make a delicious product from, let's say, an organic sauce. You've got some of these really delicious organic corn stalks, fresh from Florida. They're really super sweet, and you've got the best relish, and you want to make that relish. Well, you can't make that under cottage. You'd have to have that recipe sent off to the lab and tested, and has a plan written up, and then you can go and make that in bulk and sell that wholesale to restaurants, stores, and also at the green markets. So that's why Melissa's a great source of contact, because she could set you in the right path to tell you where to go and who to go with, so that you can get what you want to make out there for sale. Okay. And then, of course, if you're not cottage, you can make more than $50,000 a year, which is everybody's dream, right? We're going to make it rich. We're going to be famous, and we're going to be on TV. So, any other questions?
I would love to know, like the cost of that then, like, and the difference, because I remember we had a conversation once about just, how costly that can be, and that whole process that you just explained.
Yes. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Jennifer. So typically what happens is the state will have on their main website for businesses, when you go to the Florida Department of Ag's website, they will have a application process. Once you've talked to them on the phone, you'll go on and make an account online. And in the application process, based on the ingredients that you're making, the licenses are set by regulation. So for, let's say you want to make a salsa, that would be a canned low acidic food. It could range anywhere annually, a license in a light commercial kitchen, anywhere from $300 to maybe $400. If you're a grocery store and you're carrying food, your license, of course, would be higher because you're carrying multiple faceted products. But if you're making it, if you're the producer, the food producer, you're looking somewhere, no more than $500 a year. And that's your license. However, you can have multiple licenses, and this is what you and I were talking about. I am both a wholesale and a retail producer. So I have a mobile permit that allows me to go anywhere in the state of Florida and sell my product at events. That is a separate price than my manufacturing license. So for me, my startup originally was less than $500, and now my licensing can run close to $1,000 a year. So you can grow your business as you grow your customer base, and you can keep your costs low, but you could eventually, you'll see that you'll be spending more money because you want multiple licenses to bring your product to market.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? Everybody, can you unmute yourselves? We were able to mute you, but we cannot unmute you. So if you would like to jump in the conversation, you do have to unmute yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so on that, so if you do want to sell products at events, like, you want to go to a market, or you want to sell at, like a trade show or fair or whatever,
Sure.
can and you've just started selling whatever you're selling, your
Right.
cakes or whatever goods, you have to have a license, or like it can be a one-time license, or it has to be a full
Oh,
business?
yeah. So in cottage and in business, regardless, you always have to, in the state of Florida, get yourself registered as a business if you're using a fictitious name or if you're a corporation. As an individual, you don't have to do that if it's just, Ann Nyhuis's jellies.
Yeah.
But I go under the name of Garden's Glory, so I have to open my business and put it on Sunbiz. Then from there, I have to go to my county that I'm operating my business, and I have to pull an occupational license. So after I get the occupational license, then I can go to the green market, if I choose to go to green market, and pay them rent for my space. It's technically like not a brick and mortar, but it's you're renting the time that you're there. And events are the same way. You can go to an event and pay, anywhere from hundreds of dollars to $20. It just depends upon who's running the event and how often. And they'll require some proof, maybe sometimes of insurance. They may require a Department of Revenue sales tax number. You really won't know until you get involved into what you need to carry. But working with the Department of Revenue doesn't cost you anything. You have to collect tax on taxable items, and some foods are not taxable, so you're exempt, but you still have to do your reporting. So you really should talk to an attorney. You should talk to an accountant if you're going to go really big before you step into that realm. But definitely you can get your feet wet in the cottage food industry, because you'll just be filing any sort of revenue you have under your personal Social Security number. You don't have to go get an FEIN number or anything like that. So there's different levels. When you're first starting out as a startup, it's a great way by using cottage food, so long as it's allowable food source.
And let's open it up to everybody else still on the call. Why don't we go around and add, or let the group know if you are currently producing food or some sort of item, either in the cottage industry or you're interested in it.
Yeah. Anybody's got a business in cottage?
We'll step in with our class. This is Barbara Jane, Sassy Palette, and we have 3 students here that are just about to embark on very possibly the cottage food industry.
Oh, good.
That's
Congratulations.
Great. That's our 2-week class, and we're sorting that through and out as to what their designation would be. Does it fall under cottage? Does it fall under Department of Ag? Does it fall under the Department of Professional Regulation in Business as a caterer?
Right. So essentially, when you are looking at producing a food, it is based on the ingredient, as I said before. So the state looks at your ingredients first, and there is a link on the website that will show you a price point. Like, it'll break it into categories, and then it'll say how much the license would be. That's if you're going to become a manufacturer. But using that as your guide, you essentially know whether or not you have to worry about ramping up your business when you add unallowable food products into your line. But you are allowed to make, so let's say you got somebody who's going to make an allowable food product. They're going to make rolls and biscuits. So essentially they would probably go into the cottage. They're just cottage. They do it out of their home. But then they want to advance that to a wholesale or manufacturing business line. Then they would go under the Department of Business Regulation and speak with them if they consider themselves a caterer. Or if they're just a baker, then they can go in as a manufacturer under FDACS, which is the food and safety side. So that's why I left that phone number for Melissa, because she'll direct you in which department you need to go to once you tell her what you want to make. It's easy. But I want to focus mostly on the cottage, because you can very inexpensively start your business. You have an ability to price out what your ingredients are. determine the amount of time you have to put into making your product, and then taking it to, let's say, the green market or selling it out of your home. So it gives you an opportunity to get your feet wet and get feedback. Is this product really going to take off? So I've heard a lot of people who start their cottage business have 4 or 5 ingredients that they want to work with, and they stay strictly under the allowed food making products, which is the bright way to do it, actually, because it allows you to grow with your business. Because startups, in the beginning, you got a whole lot going on, and the main thing you just have to worry about is your label. Just make sure your label says it's cottage, and then you're good to go. And let's talk about internet. You can, on Facebook, set a price point and collect the money, but you just can't put your product in the mail. So as long as you don't do the mail order thing, you're going to be fine. You just need to extract a location where you can sell, have them come to your home, or you can bring it to, let's say, the green market, and they can pick it up there. So that's kind of sort of how cottage works. It is controlled in that facet.
Hold on one second. Del has a question, but he can't figure out how to unmute. Kendra, do you know how to leave?
There's like a little mic you have to tap it again so the line goes out. Yeah.
If he on his phone, if he has an unmute button,
You should still see a bar right above or right below the 4 pictures. And there's a quote, like a phone receiver to the far right and a red button to the far left.
Okay.
And somewhere about 2 in is an icon of a microphone. If it has a line across it, then it's muted. If it does not, then it's unmuted.
Right.
Tapping it unmutes it.
So back to why things are regulated. When I was talking to Melissa at the state, lovely person, by the way, you can call her anytime, she tries to explain that a lot of people don't know what cottage food is. So their focus is that the food has to be prepackaged, obviously made from your home, but that nobody would get sick eating it. So because their mission is for food safety. So knowing that and approaching it that way, they are accessible. You can talk to them. They want you to be successful. They're going to help you with your business. They're going to answer your questions. I've never had any time anybody not direct me and give me the answers that I need. So you shouldn't be afraid to call them and talk to them. A lot of people think, oh, you know, it's a state and it's scary and it's overwhelming, but it actually isn't, because only you at the time you're running your business are going to know exactly what technical questions you need answered, and they can help you do that. So when we started, we did ball jar glasses, you know, the little flat lids with the little rings, and you would sanitize the jars and put it in the oven, and you get it all hot and all that kind of stuff. And I knew that the recipe would only yield so many in a batch because it's a small recipe. That's the concept of cottage. But as you progress, you're going to find better ways and better products to buy from, and getting them at wholesale prices or buying them at cheap or discount or on sale. And then you change your profit margin when you're reselling direct to the consumer. So when you hear words like not allowed foods or end user, just remember that's the consumer. A restaurant's considered a middleman. A store is considered a middleman. Cisco Foods is considered a middleman. They're taking the food that's made and transferring it and giving it to somebody else for resale. Those are not allowed under cottage. Cottage is a relationship between you and your customer. So you have to preserve that so that you don't get yourself in any sort of trouble. But there's a tremendous amount of growth right now with the new movement for local and fresh food and fresh from Florida. So you can do all that as well and advertise. but you can't advertise as a wholesaler on the internet. That would get you in trouble, so don't do that. That's just a little flag reminder. But yeah, I mean, nothing's better than having your food bought, and then you get the nice feedback and someone say, oh, I really, really like that. It just motivates you to do some more. So for a startup, I'm going to say to make extra money, it was very attractive. Even when it was only $11,000 when I started out, it was attractive, and now it's up to $50,000.
+17278491626.
Anybody else got a question?
Is now
for me?
exiting.
Okay, so remember, no tomatoes, no pickles. They're regulated. Corn, no. I hate to say it. No sprouts, raw sprouts. Anything that's used with water and sits in water or darkness, they're going to say no to. She also told me that if you make sauces and barbecue sauces, you have to get a license. So anyways, it's an inexpensive way for you to get your homemade, handcrafted product out there in what we call a niche market called the eco community, and you can grow from there. So I can't wait to hear what you're all making, and I hope you go on with your adventures and contribute to your local community, something that you've loved and valued, and have something really tasty to share. Okay, thanks, folks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Glenn Whitworth.
Is now exiting.
Bye, Annie.
Bye. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. Jennifer, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Is there still anybody on the call
Yeah,
that would
but
like to ask?
Tom is still on.
Tom?
Scott seems to be on, and Tom is still on. Did they have any questions for us? Okay. Okay.
And why don't you talk about some of the barriers that you kind of experienced that have been difficult for you and your business? Because I think that's something that would be interesting for people who are looking
Okay.
to
Sure.
Or-
So typically, when you jump from the realm of cottage food into a non-allowable food source, that's the first hurdle, is identifying what it is and then dealing with big regulations. And I mean really large regulations. So when your inspector comes out, you have to be ready and you have to be prepared. This isn't something you jump into lightly. Like, let's say the ingredient for the pepper jelly, it's the perfect example. I didn't need a manufacturing producer's license so long as I didn't put pepper in my pepper jelly. Well, it's not a pepper jelly without a peppers, as we all know. So sending the product out to the lab and getting that back takes a little time. Tweaking the recipe so that you yield a certain amount and making it shelf stable, I say was the first hurdle. And then after that, the labeling became very convoluted because you really have to link into FDA and you have to follow the FDA guidelines. So in labeling as a manufacturer, there are different price points where you're exempt and non-exempt. And if you don't have your food tested, you won't know the law because the lab will tell you and the results what type of labeling you're required. So you don't have to know everything, but you do have to pay for that. The working with the labs and having your recipes tested are expensive. So you have to know first that this is a product that you can make some money on because you don't want to just throw money away. So the pepper jelly, we went through the process of having it done. We went through the FDA, learned how to do the labels. We had our labels done and created and put on our product. Then came the next hurdle, your market. So you can get a dual license if you go for your wholesale manufacturing. If you become a retail manufacturer only, then no, you can't wholesale. So a lot of producers don't know that, and when they first apply for their application, they strictly get a retail. And then they find out later that they could have done wholesale and got a mobile retail license. And mobile is nice because you can take it anywhere in the state of Florida, do events, and not have to pull a county license in every county you're bringing your product to. So you do want to talk to the state about what your end users are going to be and what your goal is, so that you can save some money and not make mistakes like I did. I pulled every license, and some of them I didn't need. So, and some manufacturing locations are even in a city limit, so you have to pull a county and a city license. So as you can see, the prices start to rack up if you don't know going in. And that's why talking to a lawyer, talking to your accountant, talking to your state, your tax collector's office, finding out, and also the state, who you want your product to get to, can actually save you a lot of time and heartache. So I happened to have a little problem recently with getting my licensing transferred. They don't do that. So you have to start all over again. So if you move your location, when we went to a bigger, lovely kitchen, professional kitchen, we had to start from scratch. So we had to go back and have an inspection, spend hours with the inspector. He sees you make your product, and then you get your licensing. So I recommend that if you really, really want to sell to wholesale restaurants and at the green market, you might want to pull a dual license for retail. But retail, don't be confused. Retail means you're selling out of the kitchen spot, the location that you're at. So some kitchens, they don't have a storefront, so you don't have to pull the retail, you just need your mobile. So there are different licensings, and of course they will help you understand what they are. But I didn't know that going in, so it did cost me a little bit of time and money, but we're good. We got all our licenses, and we're on the database, and people are buying internet and everything else. And you can send it through the mail when you're a wholesaler. So you can't do that with Cottage. So you can build your business based on the type of structure, your business plan that you have for your business. And it's nice to work with maybe the Small Business Association. They're at your local community colleges, state colleges. They offer free classes. You can connect with them at their main offices. I think it's in Fort Pierce. They can help you navigate your dream and how to get it out there in the public. And because you just can't know everything, you're trying to run a business. So, there's a lot of hats you have to wear. But once you get connected with the right people and you've had your sit down, you're off and running, and then you never really look back. So they really want you to be successful. They will help you. But it's always important to do your homework first, know what the rules are, talk to your lawyer, talk to your accountant, talk to your local municipalities or your green markets, wherever you want to bring it, and see what they want. And then just align yourself. One thing I didn't talk about, and I just want to mention it briefly, a lot of green markets now require you to carry insurance. I get this question all the time. Insurance, where do I get my insurance? Well, typically for a green market, it's different than a business license insurance. So you just need an occupational type of a license for the green market. And then under your rider for your automobile insurance, you can get a general liability for your tent. And it will insure all of the property that you have under the tent, which is a few $100s worth of inventory you typically bring to a green market. And then if somebody should get hurt at your tent, or the tent next to you breaks your product, it just kind of gives you added insurance for replacement costs. And technically that's sufficient for a lot of the green markets, but people don't know that they have to carry it. And they kind of go in a tailspin, like, where do I go? Where do I go? And there's a lot of insurance companies, if you're really, really small, even Cottage, they'll just tell you to get a rider on your automobile. You don't have to go into a big, manufacturer's type of life insurance, and that's those totally different liability limits. So just bear that in mind when they talk to you about those things. You're going to talk to your green market, find out what they want you to have. So all those things, it's just dialogue. You just have to have a discussion, but everybody wants you to be successful. So it's just a matter of a week or two, and then you're up and running. So it's not to be, I don't want to intimidate anybody. It's just got to know where to go, who to talk to.
No, you've definitely been giving some great advice. We have about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Why don't you run down just quickly, like where you think the first point of contact for a new startup should go? I mean, you mentioned a couple of different avenues, a business center and
Sure.
the tech sector, but where do you think really someone should start?
So I found this book online, which was really a great resource. I saw a post on Instagram, of all things, from a guy named Forager, and he recommended this book, Homemade for Sale. I don't know if you can see it. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
And it talks about the United States embracing homemade products. It's a microeconomic type of book, very, very informative. So when you don't know and you really want to kind of get a checklist, this book is really, really good. And you can get it on Amazon. The author is Lisa, I'll have to spell it, Kivirist, and John Ivanko, Ivanko. Mother Earth News picked them up. That's a magazine. And they talk about everything that you should really kind of prepare yourself for before you make your first item for sale. Then the next thing, if you're doing cottage, I would recommend that you probably talk to your CPA. They will help you create a financial structure so that you don't go bankrupt. Because usually startups, they start up under $2,500. So you want to use every penny to your advantage, and they kind of help you. So, tax season isn't the best time to chat with them, but as soon as it's April 17th, feel free to give them a call, and they'll guide you. But if you feel like you're knowledgeable in that area, because everybody has their own strengths, I would say contractually you always want to talk to an attorney. But the SBA is the Small Business Association, and it's a program designed from the nation to help small businesses and entrepreneurs get started. And they hold free classes at the Indian River State Community College in our East Coast area. But there's other, I'm sure there are other SBA locations in your counties. You're just going to have to go to their main website, sba.org, I think it is, and put in your zip code, and they'll tell you where to go. But essentially, all these things are just what I would call preliminary. Get to know what you need to know. Keep a notebook. Write your notes down. But it took me, for my cottage, to get my cottage business running, it took me only 3 months. My manufacturing licensing, it took me a year. So there are different regulations. So get out there, make your cottage foods, and share, because the community is asking for it, and they're craving it, and they want something healthy and tasty and homemade, and a niche that only you, as the creator of your food, can bring to the table that nobody else can bring. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, that's great information for everyone, I'm sure. So thank you so much for being here with us today. And thanks for everybody who is here on the call. And we will we'll have your contact information up, I believe, on the website. So if
Thank you.
What you do.
Thank you. Well, it was nice. Thank you for having me. Like I say, all the contact information are on the slides, as well as the brochure. So feel free to read through your typical questions that people ask. It's all on there. So I hope we covered all your questions, and it was a real honor to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Okay,
Have a great
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.